You drift into a dimly lit workshop where the scent of iron and oak shavings hangs in the air, wrapping around you like a threadbare blanket. A single lantern sways gently overhead, its meager glow kissing the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling. You feel the hiss of the forge at your back, punctuated by the occasional crackle of coals, almost like a lullaby if you squint. Here, in the sleepy heart of a medieval town, you're about to spend a day in the life of someone most people would pay to avoid, a torturer. You probably won't make it through this day. If you're enjoying this slow roast of medieval misery, you might as well like and subscribe. No pressure, just a gentle nudge from your friendly neighborhood narrator. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? I've always wondered if the midnight hour in Kyoto feels different from the gloaming in Graz. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You step forward, the wooden floor creaking beneath your boot. The plaster walls are pocked and stained, half hidden behind racks of gleaming tools, some slender as knitting needles, others bulky as small shields. You run a fingertip along the curve of a simple iron cuff. It's cold, breath-stealing cold, like the kiss of a particularly moody ghost. A hush settles in your chest as you survey the array of instruments, each one a testament to human ingenuity misapplied. A single, proud fact anchors this scene. By the 14th century, European courts had codified torture as a lawful means to extract confessions, overseen by appointed officers who earned their keep in far crueler ways than coin alone. It was so integral that some cities kept detailed ledgers of torture expenses alongside grain and timber. You can almost hear the clink of quills scratching account books. Yet, behind the grim ledger lies a stranger note. In some corners of Bavaria, it was customary to offer a torturer a celebratory mug of beer after a particularly successful session, sort of like giving a gold star to your dentist. Ironically, they'd sip it in a dim corner, swapping gossip about the latest beheadings as if discussing the weather. You breathe deeply, tasting the faint tang of smoke and sweat. Your eyes drift back to a small window high on the wall, where drapes of smoke curl out into the night sky. Remember that street you walked past earlier, with shuttered inns and jostling carts? It's back, just beyond that window, all quiet now, except for the distant bark of a dog. You sense the town settling in for evening. A lull before dawn brings another round of deliveries. Fresh victims, fresh nightmares. A light breeze snakes through the window, carrying with it the scent of freshly baked bread from the baker's down the road. You can practically feel the heat of his oven, a cozy contrast to the forge's coals. You wonder for a flicker if the baker knows what goes on just a stone's throw away. Probably not, or maybe he does, and chooses not to look. Historians still debate whether local artisans would blind themselves to the darker side of their neighbors, or if they simply found it easier to pretend the racks and irons belonged to blacksmiths forging horseshoes. A stray mote of ash drifts past your shoulder. You start to speak, an offhand comment about how you'd be more comfortable sipping tea in a plush armchair. But catch yourself. That would be delightful. But you're here. You are the torturer for the day, and by rights, you're supposed to be unflinching. Instead, you feel your heart flutter like a trapped sparrow. A quiet joke flits through your mind. You never thought your worst enemy might be a squeaky floorboard. You lean down to test a loose plank, Nothing dramatic, just the kind of thing a builder might curse over a pint. Another light jab at irony. If you wanted to be a handyman, you'd have taken up carpentry, right? Instead, here you are, mastering the dark arts of coercion, like a chef perfecting a recipe you'd never serve to guests. The lantern flickers as someone enters the room. A clerk, small and timid, bearing a parchment. He hands it to you with a nervous cough. It's a list of appointments for tomorrow. 3 suspects accused of witchcraft, 1 of petty theft, and an unfortunate soul-sayer who apparently overstepped his bounds by reading omens on the noble's doorstep. You glance down. The parchment is smudged where his fingers shook. You raise an eyebrow. Another busy day, eh? You murmur, voice nearly swallowed by the forge's groan. The clerk offers a weak laugh. Like any good dark comedy duo, you exchange a look that says, "Isn't this just dandy?" before he scuttles away, leaving you alone with the tools and your thoughts. And so, you brace yourself. The coals glow brighter, as if beckoning you closer. Your boots whisper against the wood. A faint hum of something like anticipation or dread settles over you. No turning back now. You cradle a half-cooled iron poker in your hand, feeling its weight. It's comparable to lifting a slightly overripe pumpkin, awkward, unwieldy, and likely to bruise your ego if you're not careful. You maneuver toward the center of the room, where a low wooden bench awaits its next unfortunate guest. You pause, musing that benches are usually for rest, not restraint. Medieval irony? Take a bow. This place, like many guilds in the 13th century, operated under a charter that granted torturers official status and a guaranteed retainer funded by the crown. It was, in effect, a stable job in a world where stable didn't mean pleasant, good for pensions, bad for the soul. In one corner, you spot a tiny display of spoons and ladles, curiously out of place among the harsher implements. Here's your weird cultural tidbit. Some medieval torturers doubled as executioners and meal tasters for nobles, ostensibly to ensure the food wasn't poisoned. So yes, the same person who strapped you to a rack might later taste the Duke's soup. Just in case. It's a career with built-in job security, but not personal security. You set the poker aside and move to a rack draped in chains. Each link is smooth, worn by countless shifts and tugs. You lift one chain, noting a delicate engraving, a tiny fleur-de-lis repeated along its length, a detail so trivial it almost makes you giggle. Isn't it funny how beauty sneaks into the ugliest places? Almost makes you doubt whether human nature is wholly bleak. Historians still debate whether those engravings were meant to mock or simply to remind practitioners that elegance and cruelty often walked hand in hand. A distant bell toll drifts in, marking the hour. The world outside is mostly asleep, save for the occasional carriage rattling over cobblestones. You imagine the baker turning loaves, the blacksmith forging horseshoes, the lamplighter working his rounds, all unaware, or willfully ignorant, of the workshop's evening shift. You hook the chains over a beam and tug lightly. They clank, a sound oddly musical, like wind chimes in a graveyard. A mental aside, if you told your younger self you'd become a wind chime tester, he'd have probably demanded a refund from life. 3 light jokes pile up. I thought chimes were made of glass. At least this one's unscented. And I was going to be a bard. But alas, too many shattered instruments. Your eyes wander to a small, hand-painted fresco near the ceiling, depicting a saint staring sternly at a devilish figure. It's chipped in places, but still vibrant. Crimson robes, cobalt wings. The town's church likely commissioned it to keep them mindful of sin. Right above a basin of water used to sterilize these instruments. Another grim nod to hygiene, a reminder that even in darkness, someone cared about cleanliness. You inhale and sense a shift in atmosphere. The forge's roar dims to a smolder, as if exhausted by the day's labor. You recall that earlier street, the one outside the window, where you saw a child chasing a hoop. That same child might now be tucked in bed, dreaming of simpler times. You feel a tug of empathy, laced with absurdity. You're part of the machinery that makes those simple dreams possible, in a perverse sort of way. A slender figure appears in the doorway. A novice, clutching a rag and bucket. You wave them forward. They slosh water over the stone floor, murmuring apologies for every drip. You smile, half encouraging, half exasperated. It's just water, you whisper. Worse things have spilled. The novice flinches, as if you spoke of spilled acids. You stifle a laugh. Mid-sweep, they glance at the wreck. Do you ever regret it? They ask. Voice barely above a moth's whisper. You pause, leaning on the poker, and consider. You aren't sure, an academic uncertainty settling in your chest like sediment. Maybe regret is too grand, too human a notion for someone in your line of work. Yet you feel something. A flicker of doubt, a pang of what-ifs. You offer a wry grin. Regrets for poets, you say. And we make lousy poets. 3 ironic lines leap forth. I don't rhyme anyway. My meter's off. And odes to sorrow rarely win contests. The novice cocks their head, uncertain whether to laugh. Outside, the bell tolls again. Dinner hour in the taverns. Warm stew, fresh ale, laughter. You remember the baker's wafting aroma from earlier, that cozy contrast to this ironclad reality. You feel the heat from the forge on your neck, the weight of the poker in your hand, the ghost of every soul who ever passed through these doors. And so you stand, caught between empathy and duty, between the hammer of authority and the anvil of conscience. The novice finishes cleaning and sets the bucket aside, waiting for your next command. You inhale the mix of smoke, sweat, and musty stone, reminding yourself that even bread needs fire to bake. Curtain falls on this scene, but the day is far from over. You pat the novice's shoulder, gentle if a bit forced, and step back into the glow of the forge. The rack awaits. The chains clink softly, and you steel yourself for whatever comes next. You follow the novice out of the chamber into a narrow corridor where torch sconces line the walls, flickering like half-asleep fireflies. The air here carries a damp chill, as if the building itself were exhaling. You pause to sift the shadows with your eyes, noting the familiar creak of timber overhead. Remember that squeaky floorboard you toyed with earlier? It's still there, still judging you. You step into a side room where a long wooden table holds a row of files, bound with twine and wax seals. Each bundle represents a case, a story, a rumor vetted by the local magistrate. You untie the nearest scroll and unroll it on the oak surface. The name of today's first guest, accused of coin clipping, literally shaving off bits of silver to fund a gambling habit. You can almost hear the clink of stolen shavings. A cold fact anchors this moment. In the late 13th century, tampering with coinage was considered high treason across Europe, punishable by anything from branding to decapitation. It was a crime taken almost as seriously as plotting against the king himself. Yet, buried in the margins of some regional ledger, there's a bizarre note. A handful of torturers kept pet dormice in their private quarters, believing the little mammals could sniff out poisoned food. This oddity feels like something you'd see in a medieval episode of My Strange Pet, except the reward for success was a meal that might be your last. You trace a finger along the rough edge of the scroll, then roll it back up with exaggerated care, as if handling an ancient scroll of arcane secrets rather than tomorrow's docket. You catch the novice watching you, brow furrowed. You shrug and offer a half smile that borders on sardonic. "Every day's a surprise, isn't it?" you murmur, echoing a memory of the clerk's earlier sweat-stained parchment. You move into the adjoining chamber, where the sound of water dripping into a stone basin echoes like a metronome. You lift the lid of a small box on a side table. Inside, a battered leather-bound tome of torture protocols, inked around 1375. It's rumored to be the reference guide for practicing officers, complete with woodcut illustrations detailing posture, pressure points, and the dreaded chair of knives. You resist the urge to flip through it like a weekend magazine. A whisper of scholarly uncertainty floats to the surface. Historians still debate whether the original desk of shame was ever widely used, or merely a cautionary legend to frighten the curious. You glance across the room at the rack, recalling how its chains once chimed like untimely bells. You feel a breeze, courtesy of that same high window, stir the page edges on the table. Through it, you glimpse the street again, the inn's sign swinging empty, the baker's chimney sending plumes into the rose-tinted dusk. A stray cat slinks along the gutter, perhaps hunting the bakery scraps that fell this morning. You speak softly into the quiet, as if narrating a bedtime story to a particularly anxious child. "Imagine," you say, "trading places with a cat, free to roam, free to ignore the clang of chains and the hiss of coals." You pause for effect, letting the irony settle. 3 light jabs slip out naturally. "Feline life's looking pretty good right now. I hear the fish market's a real hotspot, and no spreadsheets in that gig either." Your hand drifts to a set of leather straps hanging on a peg. Each strap is etched with initials, probably the maker's mark, but you like to pretend they stand for former victims. A macabre Robin's Gallery. You tug one free and snap it between your fingers. The leather's tension, a familiar strain under your fingertips. A distant shout cuts through. Someone in the courtyard has spotted a wayward goat. The novice startles, nearly dropping a lantern. You chuckle, soft, almost a sigh. "Even goats need to break the monotony," you remark. The novice laughs, relief flitting across their face like a moth to flame. You set the strap back and turn to a small shelf lined with earthenware jars. A few are labeled in spidery script: camphor, myrtle, and one you can't decipher. Probably the remnants of someone's attempt at poetic labeling. You sniff the camphor jar out of habit. Its pungent aroma piques your senses like a cold splash of water. A thought chiming with absurdity occurs. If only the human soul were as easily labeled. You push off from the table and stride back toward the main room, lantern in hand. Coals glow faintly, beckoning. The rack stands proud, its chains dangling like sentinels. The walls seem to lean in, attentive. You take a steadying breath, feeling the weight of the day and the solemn duty that clings to you like a second skin. Tomorrow's tasks loom, but for now, you're here. You are the keeper of stories written in iron and ink, of confessions squeezed from lips by merciless design. And though you navigate this realm with a touch of dry humor, you sense the gravity beneath each jest. A last ironic twist. You, the purveyor of fear, also serve as its reluctant caretaker. With that, you step back into the lantern's circle, ready to meet the first arrival. The door creaks open, and a hooded figure shuffles in, wrists bound by coarse rope, eyes darting like startled birds. You watch them approach the bench where your poker rested earlier. Their cloak is worn thin, ceramic clasps chipped. You note a faint scent of lavender, probably from a token pressed into their hand by a worried spouse or a dying parent. A firm historical anchor here. During the 15th century, the use of forced confessions was so widespread that some regions required periodic legal reforms to rein in overly zealous torturers. The edicts, however, often included exceptions, effectively legitimizing brutality under the guise of justice. It was a paradox sacred in its logic. You offer the hooded figure a seat. They obey with a tremor. Beneath the hood, you discern keen eyes, sharp, defiant, curious. Probably a scholar or a minor cleric, you guess, based on the careful way they fold their hands. An obscure tidbit surfaces. In some Italian city-states, accused clerics were allowed to carry personal prayer books into the torture chamber, supposedly to comfort them, though the books often ended up smeared with wax, ink, and tears. You stand behind them, your silhouette merging with the shadows. You run a hand over the new instrument you've placed on a nearby stool, a slender iron gauntlet with protruding spikes, as sinister-looking as a porcupine's nightmare. It gleams under the lantern, and you can almost taste the anticipation in the air. A scholarly aside presses in. Historians still debate whether the spike gauntlet was a practical tool or a staged prop to elicit terror rather than actual pain. You lean in, whispering, "Depends on your definition of practical." 3 ironic quips follow. If you prefer silent screams or a dramatic flourish, and either way, it pairs nicely with dark ale. The hooded figure flinches as you tighten the gauntlet's wrist straps around their own arm, an odd reversal that makes them blink. You flex your fingers, testing the weight and balance. You feel the old scar on your palm tingle, a reminder of days you drilled in a blacksmith shop before life took this darker turn. Outside, the bells toll again, a steady heartbeat to the city's slumber. You picture the baker's oven cooling, the tavern's last embers dying in pewter mugs. You recall coaxing the novices' hesitant laughter earlier, an echo of humanity in this ironclad routine. You lean close to the prisoner's ear and murmur, "Ever seen a porcupine up close?" Their eye widens. You pause, savoring the moment, like a chef letting a sauce simmer before the final stir. You pivot, holding the gauntlet aloft, then let it rest against the victim's shoulder with minimal pressure, just enough to let them know it's there. A bead of sweat rolls down their temple, catching the lantern's glow. "Tell me about the missing funds," you say, voice gentle, almost soothing. "And I might consider easing up on the pressure." A faint irony drips through your tone. Negotiation via prehistoric manicure. They swallow hard, voice quivering. I traded coin for manuscripts," they stammer. "I needed the money to pay for parchment." You cock an eyebrow. Parchment being a precious commodity rarer than silver in certain scholarly circles. You grasp the gauntlet's wrist strap and twist your hand, applying a fraction of the gauntlet's menace. The prisoner's breath hitches. You pause again, letting the silence stretch and bend. 3 subtle jokes flicker. Parchment's expensive, but you miss the coupon season. Next time, try a library open access model. And I hear hashtags are free. They gasped admission. And you release the gauntlet, watching their chest rise and fall in quick rhythms. You jot a mental note. Confession obtained with minimal damage. A win in both your ledger and your conscience. You offer them a dried fig from your pocket. Court protocol as it happens. To reward cooperation, they take it with trembling fingers. Surprise, softening their gaze for a moment. You can almost believe they might thank you, if such things existed here. Stepping back, you glance at the rack and chains across the room, as if they're an old friend waiting patiently. The forge's low rumble underscores your next move. You slide the gauntlet onto the stool and return the fig's empty wrapper to your pocket. You address the novice, who hovers at the door. Record it under partial compliance. You instruct, and fetch a fresh strip of parchment. I'll need to formalize the confession. The novice nods, relief and curiosity warring in their eyes. As they hustle off, you allow yourself a brief exhale. The process unfolds like a dark ballet. Intimidation, revelation, resolution. You wonder, not for the first time, if somewhere in the grand tapestry of history there's room for a less theatrical approach. But then you shrug. The tapestry is already woven, and threads like yours tend to be stubbornly dark. A final callback tickles your mind. Remember the baker's warmth? The cat's silent prowl? The squeaky floorboard's watchful complaint? All those innocuous details persist beyond these walls. You lift your chin and give the prisoner a gentle nod. Rest now, you say. You've done enough tonight. They slump with gratitude and exhaustion, the lavender in their cloak now mingling with the faint smell of stewed fig. You let the lantern's glow wash over them, feeling the soft shift from dread to relief. Outside, the city exhales another bell toll, and you sense the night inching toward dawn. Another cycle in the relentless rhythm of history. You turn away, footsteps echoing back to the forge's glow, ready for whatever tomorrow demands. You step away from the forge's glow into a narrow antechamber where the air feels cooler, tinged with the sharp scent of vinegar and linseed oil. A wooden bench lines one wall cluttered with cloth wrappings and early medical tomes bound in cracked vellum. You settle onto the bench, feeling its coarse grain press into your britches, like an unwelcome reminder that comfort is a luxury for other lives. A low murmur of water trickles from a lead-lined basin in the corner, where you've just rinsed down the poker and gauntlet. You watch drips ripple the surface, tiny, concentric circles dissolving into nothing. It's hypnotic, almost like watching history fade into legend. You can't help but compare it to the baker's oven, where dough puffs and spreads in reassuring, predictable arcs. Here the shapes you witness feel more precarious, like the line between confession and cruelty. You pull a battered volume from the shelf, a 12th century manual on merciful cauterization, complete with crudely drawn diagrams of red-hot irons pressed to flesh. A firm historical fact surfaces. Educated surgeons and torturers often shared techniques: cauterization to stem bleeding, bloodletting to balance the humors. So the same methods used in battlefield triage found repurposed in the torture chamber. Medicine and coercion walked a fine, bloody line, yet an obscure cultural tidbit bubbles up. Occasionally, a curious victim would gift the torturer a keepsake, a lock of hair, or a carved wooden token, either out of twisted gratitude or desperate hope for mercy. These tokens were pinned above the forge, a strange collection of relics thought to ward off disease or bad luck. It's almost sweet if it weren't so tragic. You finger the tome's cover, worn smooth by generations of hands, some trembling in fear, others confident in cruelty. A scholarly uncertainty creeps in. Historians still debate whether these manuals were widely circulated among itinerant torturers or hoarded by a select few guildmasters. You glance at the novice, who hovers nearby, eager to learn but wary of drawing too close. You close the book with a gentle thud, like a sigh. 3 light jokes surface unbidden. Imagine the overdue fees on this bad boy. Late returns probably involved heated discussions, and no renew online option here. The novice lets out a soft chuckle, and you sense the tension ease just enough to remind you both that laughter still exists in this place. You rise and approach a small alcove where a single window slits open to the night. Through it, you glimpse the cat again, the same sleek creature you saw stalking the gutter earlier, perched atop a low wall, surveying its domain with practiced indifference. You raise a hand as if to wave. It blinks once, then slips away into the shadows. A callback you savor. Even in this workshop of despair, life beyond persists in silent continuity. Turning back inside, you retrieve a narrow flask of rose water, an odd luxury among the rough tools. You splash a few drops onto a scrap of linen and dab at smudges of soot on your gauntlet. Rosewater's floral scent billows gently, almost incongruous amid iron and ash. You recall the lavender perfume from the hooded figure's cloak, another gesture of humanity lingering in unexpected places. A distant bell tolls, midnight in the town's clock tower, and you imagine the baker's ovens, long cooled, the tavern doors shuttered, the streets babbling only with the clamor of wind and occasional murmur of guards on patrol. It strikes you that, for all its grim purpose, this chamber is a pivot in the city's rhythm, where secrets are spilled, order asserted, and the night's hush broken by splintering truths. You pace toward a rack of wooden stools where leather hoods and blindfolds hang. You select a hood embroidered with a faded crest, a detail so small you almost miss it. The crest belongs to a minor noble family believed to have financed the local torture guild in exchange for their own extrajudicial interrogations. A reminder that power often hides behind layers of legality and ritual. You place the hood on a stool and step back, touching its coarse fabric. Power's a funny thing, you whisper. Like a lantern, you need a flame, but too much, and it burns your hand. 3 more ironic quips stumble out. Handle with care. Flame retardant gloves not included. And consult your local torturer for safety advice. The novice reappears with a sheaf of fresh parchment and an ink pot. You nod in approval. They set the items on a small table beneath the window. You sit again, dipping a quill in ink to record tonight's observations, timing of confession, instruments used, emotional state of the subject. Each line you write feels like a stitch in a tapestry, one that will outlive you, your victims, and perhaps even your masked cat observer. As the novice watches you write, You recall the squeaky floorboard overhead, still creaking, still reminding you of the thin shelter between your world and the world outside. You smile wryly. Even old buildings have quirks. You finish your notes and close the parchment with a satisfying snap. You stand, stretching limbs stiff from crouching. A last look around this alcove, scented with rosewater and ash, and you feel the lull of quiet accomplishment. The instruments lie cleaned and ready, the records updated, the night's work nearing its close. You turn to the novice and offer a delicate nod. Tomorrow, we try the lectern method, you say softly. You'll see, it's less dramatic, but surprisingly effective. They inhale sharply, excitement and dread mingling in their gaze. You allow yourself a small grin. Outside, the cat's silhouette dissolves into the gloom. The window's faint glow dwindles as you close the shutter behind you. You step back into the forge's lingering warmth, ready to conclude the final tasks before dawn. You return to the main chamber as the forge's embers glow faintly orange, like the eyes of some great, slumbering beast. The smell of cooling metal mingles with the distant aroma of wood smoke drifting in from the street below. You set down your lantern beside the anvil, listening to its quiet gurgle before you speak. A clear historical fact anchors this moment. By the late 14th century, many European torture workshops began incorporating basic sanitation, not out of compassion, but to stave off infection that could decimate detainees before their extraction value. Iron tools were boiled, leather straps soaked in vinegar, and metal racks scrubbed with sand. Pragmatism trumped mercy. On a high shelf, you spot a curious relic, a small clay whistle carved in the shape of a laughing jester. According to local lore, torturers would occasionally blow it to test a suspect's composure, an absurd parlor trick to see if fear made them flinch. It's the kind of detail that feels ripped from a court jester's nightmare, a blend of comedy and cruelty so specific it could only emerge from medieval minds. Historians still debate whether the jester whistle was truly used in serious interrogations, or if it's merely an apocryphal anecdote passed among traveling storytellers. You imagine both possibilities: a torturer testing nerves with a grin before the rack, or an overenthusiastic performer adding flair to a grim routine. You pick up the whistle and blow softly, just enough to coax a faint, wobbling laugh from its clay lips. It's a hollow sound, but it lingers in the chamber like a question mark. 3 light jokes drift out. Warning: may induce existential dread, not recommended for bedside use, and laughs guaranteed, or your coin back. You tuck the whistle into your belt, feeling its crude shape press against your side. It's oddly comforting, like a talisman warding off monotony. You stretch and pad across the floor, toward the rack once more, boots whispering across wood, floorboards squeaking in tacit acknowledgement. On the bench beside the rack lies a peeled swatch of tanned cowhide, the new padding for tomorrow's chair of knives. You run a fingertip along its surface, supple, almost inviting. You recall the baker's bread crust from earlier, another testament that even the coarsest materials can nurture life or be pressed to darker ends. You stand before the rack, studying its tilted frame and inscribed symbol, a simple circle bisected by a thin line. It's said to represent balance, justice and mercy, pain and confession. You wonder if the symbol was ever meant to comfort the accused, or only to remind the torturer of their own fractured conscience. A soft bell-like ping echoes as the novice enters bearing a tin cup of watered-down ale, a humble reward for long hours. You accept it with a nod, taking a slow sip. The ale tastes thin, like watered paint, but it warms your belly. You glance at the novice with a half smile. Not exactly vintage, you muse, but it pairs well with existential crisis. 3 ironic lines follow. Cellar-aged by regret, a blend of oak and oversight, and recommended with a pinch of salt or tears. The novice snorts, and you almost laugh fully, an unexpected sound that turns the chamber's gloom into something softer. You place the cup on a metal tray and motion for them to approach. Together, you apply fresh padding to the chair of knives, wrapping straps and securing buckles. Your hands move with practiced ease, the novices with careful hesitation. It's a shared ritual, one part education, one part initiation. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow, catching a glimpse of the cat's shadow darting across the doorway before disappearing. Every callback feels like a silent nod from the world outside, reminding you that life continues even as you shape its darker chapters. You step back, admiring the restored chair. It gleams under the lantern, every blade poised but sheathed. Tomorrow, it might draw cries, or perhaps serve only to terrorize. All show, little tell, you murmur, your personal motto for this tool. A final scholarly aside, some records hint that certain rack makers added hidden mechanisms to adjust tension subtly, turning the device into a psychological instrument rather than a purely physical one. Whether these tweaks were widespread or experimental remains unclear. You shrug, savoring the mystery. You and the novice exchange a look, part complicity, part exhaustion. The chamber's oppressive weight has lifted slightly, as if the completed preparations have exercised a measure of dread. Outside, the first pale hints of dawn stain the horizon. You can almost smell the baker beginning to stir his dough anew. You extinguish the lantern with a practiced flick, plunging the workshop into gentle darkness, punctuated only by the dying embers and the encroaching light. You pat the novice's shoulder. Rest, you say quietly. Tomorrow, we greet the sunrise. And another set of confessions. They nod and slip away, leaving you alone with the tools, the echoes, and the flicker of possibility that tomorrow might bring something different. You settle onto the bench one last time, closing your eyes as the world hushes into the soft rhythm of waking life. You awaken to the soft rasp of sunlight filtering through a high, narrow window, casting a pale stripe across the stone floor like a guiding finger. You stretch, feeling every joint protest, shoulders tight from leaning over parchments, knees sore from pacing the chamber. The forge's embers have cooled to dull coals, but their memory lingers in the air, a warm echo of last night's labors. You rise and pad over to the rack, running a fingertip along its polished beam. Its presence feels as familiar as an old friend's steady hand. A crisp breeze drifts in as you open the door to the courtyard. You inhale the morning air, tasting dew on mossy stones and the faint tang of wood smoke from nearby hearths. You recall the baker's oven you glimpsed last night, already igniting its fire, sending tendrils of aroma across the dawn. It's a reminder that life renews itself even as your world turns on darker hinges. You gather your tools, a slender file for smoothing calloused irons, a new length of chain stamped with a heraldic rose, and a small phial of lavender oil for the novice's trembling hands. A single, concrete fact grounds your routine. By the early 15th century, most torture workshops in Western Europe had standardized inventories, with official tool lists filed at the town archive to prevent embezzlement of iron and leather. It was a bureaucrat's solution to keep bloodshed within budgetary bounds. Yet between the ledger entries, you find a curious footnote. Some medieval torturers kept miniature wooden maquettes of their devices, tiny replica racks and chairs, of knives, believing the models could psychologically prepare both operator and victim. It's a detail that makes you smirk. Miniature horrors for miniature minds. Historians still debate whether these maquettes were common training aids or simply the playful creations of overly meticulous craftsmen. You tuck that question into your pocket like a loose coin, shiny, unsettled, and bound to jingle at inconvenient moments. You step into the main chamber where the novice awaits, hands neatly folded. Their eyes widen as you produce the maquette, placing it on a stool at eye level. Think of it as shadow puppetry, you say, tapping the tiny rack. A rehearsal for the real act. 3 light quips follow almost of their own accord. Safer than live theater, no ticket required, and all the horror, none of the cleanup. The novice forces a laugh, and you see relief flicker in their posture, familiar ground under uncertain feet. You guide them through the morning's schedule. First, the petty thief who stole chickens. Next, the scribe accused of manuscript forgery. And finally, the merchant's assistant suspected of embezzlement. You can almost hear the merchant's purse weeping. You don your leather apron and lead the novice to the rack. You pause at the threshold, flicking your gaze to the window's ghostly outline of the narrow street outside. Remember that cat, surveying its domain with practiced indifference? It's perched again atop the low wall, tail flicking in silent judgment. You wave a finger, it blinks and slips away, a callback that feels like an unspoken blessing or a critique. Inside, you inspect the rack's gears, ensuring each cog turns smoothly. A precise historical note asserts itself. Some 15th century craftsmen introduced ratchet mechanisms to the rack, allowing gradual tension increases without manual resets. Innovations borrowed from watermills and clockworks. A twisted marvel of mechanical creativity. You tighten the final bolt, and the novice steps forward, lantern in hand. You breathe in the scent of oil and granite, the interplay of smell and stone that has become your personal symphony. You lean close and murmur, "Ready to welcome our first guest?" They nod, pale but determined. You give a curt, encouraging smile, a silent gesture that, whatever happens next, you've prepared them as best you can. Beyond the door, muffled voices rise, townsfolk carrying baskets of bread crusts for the prisoners. A guard's boot tapping a steady rhythm on the cobbles. You glance at the small wooden whistle on your belt, its jester's grin reminding you of last night's hollow laugh. You tap it once. It emits a soft, questioning wheeze. You swallow, steeling yourself, then swing the rack's lever. The chamber goes still, ready. In that suspended moment, between anticipation and action, you inhale deeply. The day's work awaits, and with it, fresh stories, etched in iron and ink. Each confession a fragile human thing, amplified by tool and tension. You step back, lantern raised, illuminating the space between you and the corridor. The novice straightens as footsteps approach. You straighten too, shoulders squared, and prepare to usher in the first of many dawnlit testimonies. You stand in that hushed corridor, lanterns glow, pooling at your feet, as the guard ushers in a man with hunched shoulders and eyes like milky glass. He clutches a coarse sack of stolen chickens, evidence of last night's theft, that clucks forlornly from within. You note the bag's rough weave, each thread a testament to peasant thriftiness. A firm historical fact anchors the moment. In 14th century England, stealing fowl was often punished as severely as highway robbery, under the logic that poultry theft threatened communal sustenance. Bread might be the staff of life, but a stolen chicken could starve a family. You guide the thief to the rack, where chains clink like reluctant bells. The novice's hand trembles near the lantern. You offer a steadying nod. You place the sack on a nearby stool, prod it with your toe. One hen protests with a startled squawk. A weird, cultural tidbit surfaces. Some villages used live chickens in witch tests, believing that a genuine witch's touch would turn the bird stiff as wood. It's a cruelty masquerading as communal safeguard. Historians still debate whether these avian ordeals were widespread superstitions or limited to fringe hamlets terrified of nocturnal witches. You sigh, imagining the poor bird's feathers, ruffled by both fear and folklore. You step onto the rack's platform and secure the thief's wrists in iron cuffs, pausing to note the sweetness of lavender clinging to his tunic. Perhaps a farewell gift from his mother. A callback threads through your mind. The hooded scholar's lavender, the rosewater on your gauntlet, scents that persist, softening otherwise harsh edges. You give the novice a look and whisper, begin with gentle tension. They pull the lever. The thief's posture straightens in a silent gasp. You hover, letting the mechanism whisper its coercion. 3 subtle jokes slip out. We're just stretching the truth. No spandex required. And yoga instructors could learn something here. The thief winces. You lean in. Where are the other stolen fowl? You ask, voice low, even. He swallows, eyes darting. You recall the merchant's assistant from yesterday, who confessed after 2 tugs. Proof that resolve often breaks at the slightest pressure. You tighten the rack a notch. Outside, a bell tolls the mid-morning hour, and you imagine the baker sliding loaves from his oven. Golden, fragrant comforts that contrast this chamber's chill. You picture that loaf, warm and yielding, and wonder how many hands kneaded it while hearts pounded here. You glance back at the thief. His breaths are shallow, precise. You note the medieval innovation of padded cuffs, leather lining introduced in the 15th century to minimize cuts while maximizing discomfort. A grim comfort, you think. Less blood, more compliance. The thief's resistance crumbles. He blurts out the location of his accomplice and the hidden coop in the outskirts. You release the tension, letting the rack exhale. He collapses, tears and sweat mingling in the lantern's glow. You offer him a dried fig, the same courtesy extended to the scholar, though figs are rarer than forgiveness. You step down, brushing ash from your hands, and address the novice. Record as coerced cooperation. You instruct, send 2 guards to recover the fowl and fetch a clean tunic for our guest. He'll need it. The novice nods, relief flooding their face. You move to gather your tools, but pause at the window's edge. Through it, the sun has climbed higher, igniting rooftops in a rosy glow. You recall the cat's silhouette this morning, stalking shadows before sunrise. You imagine that cat now, perhaps perched on a tiled eave, indifferent to human strife, an existence you envy more with each passing day. You collect your poker and gauntlet, packing them into a leather satchel. 3 ironic comments flit through your mind: tool bag essentials, keeper of nightmares, and call me Mr. Fix-It. You sling the satchel over your shoulder, feeling its weight settle comfortably. A distant shout from the guard tower signals recovered fowl, clucks and chains in harmony. You can almost taste the baker's fresh bread again. You imagine the irony. The thief, free from the rack, will walk home laden with both looted chickens and the fear of your workshop etched into his bones. An unintended souvenir. You straighten your posture and step into the corridor, lantern held high. The novice trails behind, parchment in hand, ready to record the next chapter. You exchange a brief, conspiratorial glance and share a wry, unspoken thought. Even in a world built on suffering, you've both found a rhythm. Dark, yes, but undeniably alive. You usher the novice forward toward the next room where new confessions await. The day marches on, each hour marked by clinking chains, inked tomes, and the relentless pursuit of truth, however twisted its shape. You inhale deeply, feeling the sturdy stones beneath your boots and the ever-present hush of history's shadows guiding each step. And so you continue, second to none in your grim vocation, weaving stories of pain and revelation into the fabric of this medieval tapestry. One confession at a time, you move through the dim corridor, lantern swaying in your hand, each step echoing off cold stone like a heartbeat in slow motion. You pass the small alcove where rosewater and ash mingled last night, its lingering scent a muted reminder that even in darkness, small comforts persist. You pause before a heavy oak door, reinforced with iron straps, the hinges oiled too recently to be an accident. Behind this door waits your next guest, a scribe accused of forging diocesan seals. A crisp fact cuts through the hush. In the early 16th century, authenticating documents with episcopal seals was so vital to ecclesiastical authority that forging one could lead to excommunication, or worse, a stay in your workshop until the ink ran dry. The church took paperwork as seriously as salvation itself. You turn the handle and usher the scribe in. He's a slight man with ink-stained fingers that tremble like autumn leaves in a breeze. He wears a scholar's robe, once crisp and white, now frayed at the cuffs and soiled by fear. You note the faint smell of mulberry ink in his hair, evidence both of his craft and his downfall. You guide him to the bench near the forge. His eyes flick to the tools, arrayed as if on display. The slender file you used this morning, the gauntlet of spikes, and the rack looming behind. You offer a thin smile and gesture to a small stool, an olive branch of courtesy. He sits, posture rigid, and you catch the curve of his shoulders tensing. You produce a fresh length of parchment and a quill, laying them on the bench, as if to say, there's still a chance for a clean confession. A subtle joke flits through your mind. No need to remix the ink today, but you keep it unspoken. You dip the quill in ink and extend it toward him. He hesitates, glancing between the quill and the rack, as though choosing between pen and sword. You lean in, voice low. Tell me how you learned to counterfeit the seal, and I'll limit the rack's performance to a mere suggestion. 3 dry quips ripple under your breath. Think of it as an interpretive dance. All the tension, none of the pirouettes, and your co-conspirators will appreciate the critique. He swallows, lips quivering. I needed money, he whispers. The church owed my patron too much, and he threatened my livelihood. You nod, understanding that even scribes can bleed when debts pile high. You stand and retrieve the spike gauntlet from its stool, flexing the iron tendrils. He blanches. You hold the gauntlet at shoulder height, letting its silhouette slice through the lantern's glow like a warning. You recall your earlier scholarly aside, whether the gauntlet was original torture or theater. Tonight, you make it both. You slip the gauntlet onto your hand and tap a finger lightly against the bench, a sound like nails on glass. His breath hitches. You pivot, resting the gauntlet's tip against the parchment, as if to rewrite his confession. Sign here, you murmur, guiding his hand. He scribbles, ink smudging as his fingers shake. You release the gauntlet and gently clap him on the back, hard enough to jar him, soft enough to remind him this is still education. He signs again, more carefully. You step back, feeling the familiar heartbeat of the workshop thrum through your boots. You remove the gauntlet and return it to its stool. The scribe exhales, shoulders uncoiling. You present him with a cup of cool water, a courtesy extended to honest scholars. He drinks deeply, eyes closing as though tasting both relief and resentment. You dip a quill in ink and add his confession to the parchment. Timeline of forgeries, names of accomplices, promised restitution. A callback from Section 3, the manual of torture protocols you glimpsed. Here, those woodcut illustrations come alive in your mind's eye. But you stay focused on parchment, ink, and quiet resolution. Outside, a bell tolls for vespers. You picture the baker's final loaves being drawn from heat, the taverns prepared for late-night revelers. You glance at the scribe's ink-stained robe and murmur, "May your next manuscript be penned in honesty." He nods, gratitude and shame entwined in his gaze. You gather the parchment and place it in a sealed pouch for the magistrate. The scribe rises, rubbing his wrists where cuffs once might have held him. You open the door, letting him slip into the corridor. As he passes, he murmurs, "Thank you." You nod, uncertain whether to accept it or chalk it up to superstition. The corridor swallows his footsteps, and you close the door behind him. The click of iron affirming another confession filed. You return to the forge's glow, readying your mind for the merchant's assistant, whose debts are whispered rather than inked. You wipe sweat from your brow and survey your tools, laid out like surgeons, before an operation. A leather apron, a coil of new chain, and a small jar of camphor sit beside the cool lantern. Yesterday's embers have surrendered to cold gray ash. An ash, you whisper, might be sprinkled over fresh dough for all anyone else cares. You heft the lantern and stride down the corridor to the final chamber of the morning, a small room paneled in oak, carpeted now with straw, to mute clattering feet. At the threshold stands the merchant's assistant, a broad-shouldered youth, whose once fine doublet hangs limp, patched at the elbow with a coin pouch scrap. His cheeks are pinched, lips as dry as stolen coin clippings. You note a faint trace of mint oil on his collar, perhaps a last-minute attempt at calm. You stifle a wry smile. Nothing soothes guilt quite like mint. A concrete historical fact grounds your ritual. In late medieval trade centers, embezzlement of merchant funds could destabilize supply chains, sending grain prices soaring or silks into short supply. commerce was the bloodstream of city-states, and corruption its shingles. You guide him to the wooden chair in the room's center, less elaborate than the rack, but equally effective at imposing solitude. The chair's arms are fitted with simple straps and a single iron bar across the back. You help him settle in, tugging lightly at the straps to gauge tension. A peculiar cultural tidbit emerges. In some Flemish towns, debtors' prisons required inmates to wear iron collars that chafed relentlessly, teaching humility through constant discomfort. It's a public spectacle, blending penance with punishment. You wonder if such collars found their way into workshops like yours. You nod to the novice, who pours a few drops of camphor oil onto the assistant's wrists, a measure meant to discourage dry skin during extended questioning. You latch the bar into place, then step back, lantern aloft. 3 dry observations slip out. Welcome to the minimalist wing. No spa day included, and complimentary anxiety provided. The assistant tries a weak grin. You allow yourself a hint of encouragement. You take a step closer, voice soft. Tell me about the missing weights, you say, eyes narrowing, and I promise I'll let you keep both ears. He swallows and begins, stammering confession of diverted profit, late-night wagers, and ill-advised loans to unknown partners. As he speaks, you release the tension in the straps, letting him lean forward in exhaustion rather than agony. You recall the scholarly uncertainty from Section 5, whether manuals of merciful cauterization truly balanced pain with healing. You think of this method, a gentle letdown rather than a snap, and you wonder if it registers differently on conscience. You decide it does. Outside, bells chime for matins. The sound crisp, ceremonial. You picture the baker pausing to the clamor before kneading dough, the blacksmith pausing mid-hammer blow to nod in solidarity with your moral quandary. You take a deep breath and let it out slowly, savoring the mixture of fresh linen, smell, and camphor. The assistant's story unravels fully, names and places disclosed with the relief of shared secrets. You release the final strap and offer him a wooden cup of thin ale. He drinks eagerly, hands shaking around the cup, eyes brightening at the warmth. You hear gratitude in his sigh. You cross to your bench and retrieve the ledger, recording full cooperation for this case. You glance up to catch the novice, watching you with wide-eyed respect. You nod once, affirming their first successful solo entry. They exhale in a soft whoosh. Victory, however minor, in this chamber of shadows. A callback strikes softly. The cat that slipped past at dawn, indifferent to human strife, now curled unseen on a rooftop. You imagine its contented purr, a counterpoint to the murmur of confessions logged in ink. You fold the ledger closed and set it aside. The merchant's assistant stands, brushing straw from his doublet. You wipe camphor oil from your fingertips and extend a hand, a handshake, human and grounding. He grasps it, eyes clear for the first time. You open the door, lantern guiding him back to the corridor. As he departs, he pauses and murmurs, "I'll never look at a ledger the same way." You offer a soft, "Nor should you," and close the door gently behind him. You return to the forge's glow and lower yourself onto the worn bench. The morning's confessions lie behind you, inked, sworn, and filed. You lean back, letting the lantern's warmth bathe you as you prepare for the afternoon's tasks. The workshop exhales around you, ready to continue its age-old dirge of truth, fear, and the merciful art of moderation. You step away from the bench where your ledger rests, ink smudged across its cover like a bruise, and cross once more to the forge's dying embers. Your boots whisper over scattered ash as you retrieve a set of freshly forged iron rings, each ring's surface blistered from the heat before being quenched in water. You hold them in your palm. They're cool now, but you can almost feel the memory of the fire in their curves, pulsing like a heartbeat. A single, solid fact underpins your morning's work. By the mid-15th century, many torture workshops had in-house blacksmiths who custom-forged tailor-made instruments on demand, allowing precise modifications for each client, a grim precursor to industrial customization. Efficiency met cruelty in a marriage of iron and obligation. You place the rings on a wooden table and fetch a small hammer from a rack of tools. The novice appears behind you, lantern in hand, brow furrowed with anticipation. You raise an eyebrow. Ready to shape some fear? You ask lightly, and they manage a tentative grin. You hand them a ring and guide their hand to the anvil's cool surface. Tap firmly, but not angrily. Anger cracks the steel unevenly. 3 subtle jokes slip from your lips before you catch yourself. No temper tantrums. We're forging, not frying. And hot take, anger's overrated. The novice laughs and tries again. Beside you, on a low shelf, sits a battered copper kettle filled with sand. You scoop a handful into a small tray. The sand, once heated, tempers metal and smooths rough edges. An obscure cultural note surfaces. Some medieval smiths believed that certain sands drawn from riverbanks at dawn imbued iron with extra resilience, a superstition echoing the belief that water carries the soul of the earth itself. You watch the novice sprinkle the sand carefully, as though performing a ritual. Historians still debate whether these sand-tempering superstitions genuinely improved metal quality or simply offered craftsmen a comforting tradition amid long, grueling hours. You wink at the novice. Either way, it's a good story. A stray shaft of afternoon sun slants through the high window, catching motes of dust like suspended stars. You recall the cat's silent vigil at dawn. You imagine it now, lounging on a sun-warmed ledge, utterly detached from your workshop's Ferris symphony. You slide a ring into the vice grips and hand the hammer back to the novice. One more tap, you instruct, guiding their aim. The ring flattens slightly under the blow, edges warming in the twilight. You release the ring and inspect it, turning it in the lantern's glow. Each ring must fit a specific chain length, precision that makes their intended use all the more clinical. You place it in a shallow bowl alongside others, a growing arsenal of restraint. You pat the novice's shoulder. Good. You're learning the craft, inside and out. Your gaze drifts to the plaster wall behind you, where the chipped fresco of the saint and devil still stares. The saint's gaze seems gentler now, as though even painted eyes can soften with time. You grin. Even saints get character development. You muse. 3 ironic quips follow. Plot twist. Devils rewriting the script. Saints unionized. Demands better portrayal. And refreshments at intermission. You clear your throat, returning to work with brisk efficiency. You retrieve a coiled length of chain stamped with the heraldic rose and lay it across the table. Each link is uniform, machine-like. No room for craftsmanship beyond the blacksmith's initial forge. Yet between the links, you glimpse tiny hammer marks left by your own hand. a personal signature etched in steel. A faint tapping beyond the heavy door signals the baker's assistant, delivering fresh loaves for the guild's midday repast. You pause to inhale the yeasty aroma drifting through the cracks, a reminder that outside these walls, life rises in warmth and sustenance. You lift the lantern higher, spotlighting your array of instruments, hammers, straps, rings, all awaiting tomorrow's confessions. You motion the novice to follow you to the small antechamber down the hall. There, a simple wooden bench sits beside a basin of warm water infused with rosemary sprigs. You gesture for them to set the rings in the water for a final rinse, a step meant to cleanse both metal and mind before instruments return to their racks. You dip your own hands, the rosemary's piney scent a balm. You close your eyes briefly, letting tension seep from your shoulders. You recall the scholar's lavender oil, the rosewater on your gauntlet, the camphor on the chair straps. It occurs to you, not for the first time, that even here you cultivate moments of care amid the machinery of control. You open your eyes and study the novice's reflection in the water, eyes bright with new understanding. You offer a gentle nod. This is where you decide what kind of torturer you'll be, you say softly, voice hushed as if sharing a confidence. One who torments, or one who tempers. 3 final observations. All depends on the flame. Oil can soothe as well as burn, and choice is the heaviest burden of all. They bow their head, silent. You pat their back, then turn to gather the now gleaming rings. You tuck them back into your satchel, alongside poker, gauntlet, and chain. You glance once more at the window. No cat this time, only shifting shadows. Before stepping back into the forge's quiet embrace, you return to the main chamber as the sun dips low, casting a warm, amber glow that bleeds through the doorway. Tonight, you expect a different sort of visitor. The magistrate himself, come for his fortnightly inspection. You straighten your apron and run fingertips through ash dust hair, recalling a fact etched in every torturer's mind. By the 16th century, periodic inspections were mandated by royal decree to curb abuses and ensure proper procedure, though the decree's exceptions often swallowed the rule. On a side table, you arrange your tools for display, each poker, gauntlet, and ring set like artifacts in a museum. The novice watches, eyes flicking between instruments and ledger, absorbing the gravity of state oversight. You exchange a look, half mentorship, half mutual dread. A discreet knock echoes. You call, enter. The magistrate steps in, robes embroidered with fine gold thread, face a mask of polite curiosity. He carries a wax-sealed scroll, today's inspection checklist. You bow. Welcome, Your Honor. Forgive the soot. We've been busy. He smiles thinly, unfazed. You lead him to the rack, inviting his inspection. He runs a finger along a chain link and nods appreciatively at your maintenance. Properly oiled, he murmurs. I see the new ratchet mechanism functions smoothly. He clicks the lever. The rack whirs, then settles silently. You hear the faint echo of ball bearings, a testament to innovative smithing. An obscure anecdote drifts through your mind. In some regions, inspectors carried their own secret tools, tiny needles to prick straps and test for hidden bloodstains, ensuring that any too harsh instruments were flagged for recalibration. Whether any inspector ever found cause to confiscate such a tool remains unclear. Records are frustratingly silent. Historians still debate whether these clandestine inspections were genuine checks on cruelty or merely ceremonial gestures to appease public outcry. You watch the magistrate's face for clues. He notes the rack, the chair of knives, the row of rings, and offers a curt nod. You usher him next to the workbench, where today's newly forged rings rest. He lifts one, testing its weight. You explain the tempering process, sand quenching, polished bevels, and he inclines his head, impressed by your craftsmanship more than your brutality. You feel a small swell of pride, artistry in iron. You guide him to the antechamber, where instruments are cleaned and stored. He eyes the rosewater-scented cloth and inquires. You explain its use for modest hygiene, a precaution to prevent rust as much as disease. He jots a note on his scroll. Sanitary measures commendable, he says. You bite back a wry thought about sanitary confessions. 3 light remarks flit through your mind. We aim to please, comfort is subjective, and don't ask about the cushions. You suppress the quips. Today is formal theater. The magistrate flips through his scroll and returns to the forge. He remarks on the ash-heaped hearth. Still serviceable. You nod and demonstrate the simple method of reviving embers, sprinkle dry twigs, coax with bellows. Efficient, he concedes. You feel a curious camaraderie in that moment. 2 stewards of fire, albeit for different ends. At last, he closes his scroll with a decisive snap. All instruments appear within regulatory bounds, he announces. You release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. He offers a final glance at the novice, who stands stiff as a reed. The magistrate's gaze softens momentarily. You've a diligent pupil, he says. You allow yourself a small, genuine smile. He departs with a nod and confiscates no tools. The antechamber door closes with a muted click, leaving you in an echoing hush. You turn to the novice, seeing relief and awe flicker across their features. You pat their shoulder. Inspection passed, you declare. Now, we return to our less formal duties. 3 playful murmurs fill the corners of your mind. No need to sharpen your quills. We'll save the theatrics for tomorrow, and curtain calls on you next time. You extinguish the forge's remaining coals with a final splash of sand. Each hiss a minor victory against rust. You gather your tools, slinging the satchel over one shoulder, and make your way back down the corridor. The frescoed saint and devil seem to glance in approval. Saintly wink, devilish smirk, an iron-bound standing ovation. Outside, the sky deepens to indigo. You pause at the window, inhaling night's cool breath, scented with bakery ashes and distant hearth smoke. The cat is nowhere to be seen, but you imagine it weaving through moonlit alleys. Immune to paperwork and oversight, you turn from the window and drop onto the bench, leather creaking beneath you. The novice sits beside you, uncertain whether to speak or simply rest in shared quiet. You place a hand on their back. Well done today, you say softly. They exhale, a whisper of gratitude, a sigh of survival. You close your eyes, letting the chamber's hush lull you as it always does. Tomorrow, new confessions will beckon. New tools will sing their metal hymns. But for now, you rest in the knowledge that even in this workshop of shadows, moments of judgment and mentorship can coexist, balanced on the thin line between mercy and authority. You cross the threshold into a low-ceilinged chamber where the scent of damp stone mingles with the faint tang of vinegary air. A single grating of barred metal in the corner holds remnants of yesterday's dregs, broken chains and tattered straps, relics of confessions past. You pause to run your fingertips along the cool iron bars. Their chill is a bracing reminder of each soul you've shepherded through this place of reckoning. A crisp fact anchors this scene. By the late 16th century, European jurisdictions often required torturers to document not just confessions, but the emotional state of each suspect. Notes on tears shed, vocal tremors, and the precise moment fear broke. These psychological reports were meant to validate that pain had done its job without tipping into outright cruelty. You step forward to a small desk, piled with leather-bound journals. You lift one, its spine cracked from repeated use. Inside, you find handwritten entries describing everything from the quake of a lip to the faintest whimper. You trace a note. Subject number 42. Tears began at sixth pull. A strangely intimate metric of human breaking points. Yet tucked between the pages is a curious ephemera. A pressed violet petal, brittle as old parchment. Some torturers believed that gifting a flower before questioning could soften the suspect's heart, an odd act of grace embedded amid coercion. It's a gesture almost tender, though perhaps more theatrical than efficacious. You inhale deeply, smelling ink and stone, and you wonder whether emotion can truly be measured. Historians still debate whether these psychological reports reflected genuine concern for justice or merely provided bureaucratic cover for brutality. You close the journal with a soft thud, like a heart settling back into the cage of ribs. A stray wisp of candle smoke curls at the desk's edge. You lean down to blow it away, your breath stirring the pages. 3 quiet jokes flit across your mind. Metrics for misery, coming soon, anxiety analytics, and, next on the docket, mood rings. You dip your quill into fresh ink and add today's annotations. Subject number 83 exhibited intermittent sobbing, confessed under calibrated tension. You press the quill a moment, savoring the subtle drag against parchment. Through the barred window, you glimpse the narrow lane beyond, the baker's chimney, now dark for the evening, lanterns flickering in shuttered inns. Remember the cat perched at dawn? You imagine it now weaving between shutters, indifferent to journals and reports. You stand, tucking the journal back into the desk's top drawer. You dust your fingers on your breeches and retrieve a small wooden box of seals. Inside, each clay stamp bears the workshop's emblem, a balance scale forged in iron. You press one into a puddle of wax, affixing it to the journal's cover with a crisp snap. The seal's impression is firm, authoritative, unyielding. You close the box and step to the center of the room, light from your lantern pooling at your boots. You imagine these walls absorbing every whisper of fear and relief, every admission scribbled in sobs and ink. You cradle the lantern's glow like a fragile secret. You turn to the novice who stands at the door, uncertainty softening their posture. You offer a gentle nod. Psychology is as much a tool as iron, you murmur. Use it wisely, lest it turn on you. 3 final quips drift out. Brain over brawn, therapy with extra steps, and emotional finesse. No extra charge. They exhale, shoulders dropping. You guide them out, lantern leading the way back to the forge's warm glow. Hearts steadied by the weight of documentation and the softer promise of understanding. You return to the main chamber, where the forge's last embers flicker like weary fireflies, ready for rest. A low hum of distant bells threads through the quiet, marking the hour before dusk's deepening hush. You set your lantern on the anvil and feel the reverberation in your palm, a subtle reminder that every sound here matters, from chain clinks to whispered confessions. An enduring fact anchors this tableau. In the 17th century, some continental courts mandated that torturers undergo semi-annual bloodletting themselves to maintain humble perspective, believing that shared suffering preserved a sense of balance and prevented sadism from taking root. The irony drips like slow honey. You step to a small corner where a polished basin of copper awaits, filled with water tinged faintly pink from residual anti-rust oils. You dip your hands into the cool liquid and let droplets bead on your skin. It's a fleeting caress against the day's harsher demands. A strange tidbit surfaces. A handful of workshops kept goldfish in jars, thought to absorb harmful emotions radiating from metal tools. The fish swam through reflections of iron, said to neutralize malice with their serene movements. Whether the fish thrived or perished is lost to time, but the notion lingers like a half-remembered dream. You lift a fishbowl from its pedestal, single goldfish gliding slowly in circles, scales catching lantern light like molten amber. You smile at its deliberate calm. Historians still debate whether these aquatic sentinels were practical temperers or mere curiosities of eccentric torturers. You set the bowl gently back, mindful of the fish's placid orbit. 3 gentle jokes surface: fintastic therapy, goldfish gossip, human drama, 10-10, and no waterboarding needed. You chuckle softly, the sound echoing across stone. You step away and arrange a row of iron picks on a wooden rack, delicate instruments designed for subtle pressure, ear picks, joint probes, fingertip razors. Each tool resembles a cobbler's awl crossed with a dentist's pick. You handle them like rare surgical gear, appreciating the paradox of precision used for intimidation. You rest your palm on the bench and lean forward, voice low and confessional. Precision can be kinder than brute force, you murmur. You recall teaching the novice how gentle adjustments often worked better than violent twists, a lesson in mechanical empathy. Outside, dusk gathers in violet folds. You glimpse the baker's dark silhouette through the window, perhaps finishing his loaf rounds, unaware that your tools recede to rest alongside the city's daily labors. You inhale the night's cooler air, tinged with wood smoke and distant laughter from taverns. You retrieve a small vial of lavender oil, uncork it, and let a drop fall onto a cloth. You dab at the delicate picks, coating their handles. The floral scent blooms, a soft benediction amid steel. You imagine that hooded scholar's lavender gift, an enduring comfort that echoes here. You pocket the vial and step back to survey your array. Burning embers, polished instruments, journals sealed with wax, and that solitary goldfish tracing its quiet circles. You feel the day's rhythm slow, each breath threaded through stone, water, and iron. You offer a final observation to the empty room. Tonight, tools rest. Tomorrow, minds awaken. 3 whispered jokes linger. Rest modes activated, mechanical lullaby engaged, and see you at dawn's first confession. You extinguish the lantern, letting darkness reclaim the chamber softly. The faint ripple of goldfish scales is your last lullaby, as you and your workshop settle into night's embrace, ready to dream of new eras, of both cruelty and compassion. You step into the final chamber of the afternoon, where the air feels thick with anticipation, as though the walls themselves hold their breath. A single lantern hangs from a wooden beam, casting long shadows that dance across the rough stone floor. You pause at the threshold, feeling the cool draft from a small grating near the ceiling, a reminder that even enclosed spaces share their breath with the outside world. A concrete, historical fact sets the stage. By the 17th century, many workshops kept strict timekeeping for each session, recording start and end hours to ensure torturers didn't overstep the legally allotted interrogation window. Clocks, whether sundials or ticking verge mechanisms, became silent overseers of cruelty. You advance to a simple wooden table, where a weathered timepiece ticks steadily. You check the hour. Sunset approaches. Behind you, the forge's embers have cooled to dusky gray, their warmth lingering like a waning memory. You recall that magistrate's inspection, the journals of sobs, the cat's indifferent vigil, each a stitch in today's tapestry. On the table lies a small leather pouch containing powdered willow bark, a primitive analgesic sometimes offered post-interrogation to ease pain. You lift the pouch, sifting its fine contents through your fingers, feeling the paradox of mercy in your palm. A subtle cultural tidbit emerges. Some torturers carried tiny flasks of wine to offer calming drafts afterward, viewing it as an ethical counterbalance, a palate cleanser for battered spirits. Historians still debate whether these post-torture consolations were sincere acts of compassion or mere gestures to soothe consciences overburdened by necessity. You uncork a small vial of port and pour 2 measured drams into shot cups carved from horn. You set the cups on a nearby stool and beckon the novice forward. Their eyes are bright with fatigue and something else, curiosity, perhaps. At the final rite of the day, you hand them a cup, then take one yourself. 3 gentle quips spill quietly. A toast to our productivity. May our confessions always flow smoothly. And here's to fewer rack pulls tomorrow. You step outside briefly, lantern in hand, and inhale the dusk-scented air. A blend of wood smoke, dew, and the faintest hint of lavender from a nearby window box. You glance up at the sky, streaked with pink and violet, imagining the world beyond these walls slipping into twilight. You lift your cup in silent salute to the unseen baker finishing his rounds, the tavern offering last call, the child in a distant alley drifting off to sleep. Returning inside, you clink cups with the novice, the soft thunk echoing like a promise. You sip the port, warm, tangy, almost sweet. It slides down your throat, a balm for sinew and soul alike. You dip a finger in the willow bark powder and offer it to the novice, who hesitates, then tastes. Their face relaxes, the tension of the day loosening like a knot unraveled. You lean back against a wooden post, lantern light flickering across your features. We've done our duty, you murmur. We've balanced fear and mercy, ink and iron. A scholarly uncertainty surfaces. Will tomorrow's dawn demand harsher measures, or will the lessons of tempering guide your hand again? You can't say. 3 final ironic observations linger in the hush. Every sunrise brings new confessions. Mercy is a tool as much as any gauntlet, and even torturers deserve a little kindness. You set your cup aside and extinguish the lantern, leaving the chamber in a gentle darkness. The novice follows, each step measured. Outside, the night deepens, and you sense the workshop exhaling its final breath for the day, ready at last to rest. You step quietly back, into the main chamber as the first pale light of dawn seeps beneath the door, painting the stone in muted pastels. The hearth is cold, but the scent of smoldering coals still lingers. A whisper of the night before. You move to the anvil, fingering the battered hammer that has shaped too many echoes of agony. Today, you have only one guest, a local midwife accused of secret dealings in herbal lore. A solid historical fact anchors your morning. In 17th century witchcraft trials, midwives were often targeted for their knowledge of medicinal herbs, suspected of brewing potions rather than poultices. Their compassionate work made them both revered and reviled, a paradox that cost many their freedom. You beckon the novice forward and produce a narrow-bound herbal manuscript, its pages damp from handling. Identify these herbs, you instruct, or face a more practical lesson. 3 dry quips surface silently. Botany with benefits, a hands-on curriculum, and no pop quizzes, just potions. The midwife enters, robes patterned with simple floral embroidery. A small pouch of dried chamomile swings at her belt. You wave the manuscript. She steps closer, hands trembling yet sure, eyes alight with both defiance and fatigue. You guide her to the table, lantern aloft. You watch as she names valerian, foxglove, and deadly nightshade with calm precision. Each correct answer draws a nod. Each hesitation invites a reminder of the rack's promise just beyond. You keep your tone gentle, as if teaching a pupil rather than interrogating an accused. A callback hums at the back of your mind. The scholar's lavender, the rosewater, the camphor, small mercies threaded through every lesson. You note an obscure detail. Some herbalists carried silver knives, believing the metal purified, cut herbs of harmful magic. You retrieve one such knife from a rack and let morning light glint off its blade. The midwife inhales sharply. Historians still debate whether these rituals genuinely protected against poison or merely comforted the practitioner with symbolic safeguard. You tuck the silver knife back and fold your arms. Very good, you murmur. But what of this? You lift a vial of tincture, its fluid dark as ink. She hesitates. Foxglove's notorious cardiac effects, yet in her gaze, you see conviction. For fevers, she says, voice steady, measured properly. It soothes the pulse. You nod, impressed by her restraint. The novice scribbles in the ledger, expert botanical testimony. Outside, a rooster crows. The world awakening in its usual, irreverent way. You glance toward the barred window and picture the cat, now likely perched on a fence post, surveying its domain with equanimity. You inhale the crisp air, laced with hay and bakery smoke. You set the tincture aside and retrieve a bowl of warm water infused with rosemary, offering it to the midwife to wash her hands. She dips her fingers in, the herb's scent rising like a benediction. You watch her shoulders relax as the ritual unfolds. 3 subtle observations fill the moment. Knowledge can be the sharpest tool. Mercy often tastes of herbs. And even the staunchest heart can soften with a proper rinse. You close the ledger, sealing her name among those who passed your botanical trial. You pat her hand lightly, an unexpected gesture of solidarity. She nods, gratitude mingled with relief, and slips away into the corridor. You and the novice return the herbal manuscript to its shelf, dust motes dancing in the dawn light. The chamber stands silent, awaiting the bustle of another day's confessions. You exhale, feeling the weight of tradition and innovation balanced upon your battered hammer. You retreat to the antechamber where tools rest between uses, the scent of rosemary and rosewater still clinging to the air. You gather a selection of leather straps, some thick and coarse, others supple and narrow, and lay them out like ribbons of possibility. Today's lesson is nuance, the art of calibrated restraint. A documented fact underscores this exercise. By the late 17th century, many jurisdictions distinguished between severe and moderate torture, prescribing specific instruments for each category. Manuals listed tables of recommended tools, an almost bureaucratic approach to brutality. You tap a strap gently. This one's for moderate persuasion, you explain to the novice, who watches with keen eyes. No spikes, no gouges, just pressure. 3 offhand jokes slip through your thoughts, like a firm handshake, no broken promises, and minimal sarcasm included. You lead the novice to a practice dummy, an old burlap sack stuffed with straw, shaped roughly like a human torso. You secure the straw arms in the thicker straps and tighten just until the form bows under tension. You instruct the novice to note how the straw yields, firmly but without shredding. Beside you, the goldfish's soft bubble echoes in a distant jar, a reminder that life persists even as you delve into mechanisms of control. You recall the fish's placid orbit, an emblem of measured movement. Much like your approach to this demonstration, an obscure detail comes to mind. Pay scales for torturers were sometimes linked to the category of torture performed. Moderate paid less than severe, creating perverse incentives to escalate. It's a stark lesson in how economics shapes cruelty. Historians still debate whether these scales genuinely influenced day-to-day practice or remained theoretical guidelines often ignored by zealous practitioners. You shrug and focus on the tactile lesson at hand. You switch to a narrower strap and attach it to the dummy's wrists. Tightening incrementally, you guide the novice, cautioning, stop when the form's outline becomes distinct. No fraying or rupture. They adjust, watching the straw compress in an even, non-violent arc. You step back, nodding approvingly. Precision over pain, you intone. Always. A distant church bell tolls morning mass. You imagine the faithful kneeling in pews, unaware of these exercises in control, occurring just beyond vaulted arches. You glance at the wooden bench where your ledger rests, its pages waiting for new entries. 3 final musings drift through the quiet. Control is a gentle art. Sometimes compassion lies in restraint, and a soft touch can speak volumes. You dismiss the practice, freeing the straw limbs and rolling up the straps neatly. The novice runs a hand over each strap's grain, as though memorizing their character. You nod and gesture toward the door. Let's ready the workshop for the day, you say. You both exit into the corridor. The lanterns glow, brightening as the world stirs to life. You sense that today's teachings, botanical insight, measured restraint, psychological nuance, will echo in every confession yet to come, weaving new threads into the dark tapestry of your craft. You return to the alcove where the golden fish glides through its glass realm, its scales catching the lantern's light like molten stars. You pause to watch its calm constancy, a silent counterpoint to your world of tension and release. The novice stands beside you, hands folded, eyes shifting between the bowl and the racks of iron beyond. You pat the wooden edge of the fishbowl. Even in darkness, small lights persist. 3 gentle quips drift under your breath. Aquatic mood lighting, subtle ambiance, and no electricity required. Your gaze drifts to a battered sundial mounted on the wall, an ancient timekeeper, still marking hours by shifting shadows. A firm fact anchors your reflection. By the early 18th century, sundials remained common in workshops despite mechanical clocks, offering a silent reminder of nature's unhurried rhythms. It was a humble protest against the fervent tick-tock of bureaucratic urgency. Yet beneath the sundial's face, you notice a tiny, hand-drilled hole. It once held a silver tassel, long since lost, and obscure tidbit surfaces. Some torturers braided tassels from condemned hair, believing the strands carried residual fear, which could be used to spook future suspects. It's a macabre keepsake, lost to time, and perhaps best forgotten. Historians still debate whether these hair charms were widespread superstition or mere pranks among guildmates. You hover a finger over the hole, imagining its vanished adornment. A flicker of sympathy curls inside you, another remnant of humanity tugging at ironclad routines. You turn to the novice. Today, we explore the power of suggestion, you say softly. Fear can be shaped by shadows as much as by steel. You lead them to a side chamber lit only by a single, low flame. The walls are lined with empty racks. The only tools present are a few chains and hooks hanging from high beams. You instruct the novice to position a chair beneath the hooks and dim the lantern. As the flame lowers, shadows stretch into grotesque shapes. Chains appear serpentine. Hooks loom like fangs. You watch the novice's pupils dilate in the flickering gloom. You guide their hand to a hook above the chair. Let them wonder what might descend, you murmur. 3 subtle jokes surface. Dinner is served, spiked seating arrangements, and no reservation needed. The novice swallows and nods. You restore just enough light for them to see you, then step back. Now, you say, ask your question. They do, voice trembling, and wait. Silence settles thick as velvet. The prey of imagination begins to coalesce. You watch sweat bead on their brow, not from chains, but from the mind's machinery. The hook remains still, but its threat feels real. You step forward and restore the lantern, revealing the benign emptiness above. The novice exhales, relief and chagrin mingling in their expression. You smile gently. Fear is half what you see, half what you think. A callback glimmers in your mind. The jester whistles, hollow laugh. The painted saint's gaze. Each instrument of suggestion, rather than direct violence. You guide the novice back into the light. Outside, a distant bell tolls for vespers. Once more, you picture the baker's ovens now cold, the streets hushed under twilight's quilt. You inhale the dusk air and let it fill your lungs like a benediction. You gather the empty chains and hooks, hanging them back where they belong. The novice helps, reverently. You nod. Remember this. Tools needn't bite to leave their mark. 3 final observations settle in the hush. Imagination is a potent instrument. Sometimes shadows cut deeper than steel, and mercy means knowing when to retract the blade. You extinguish the lone flame, letting the chamber become a canvas for returning nighttime's calm. The fishbowl's goldfish glimmers faintly as you depart, followed by the novice's steady footsteps. You enter the main workshop to find the anvil polished to a soft sheen, awaiting today's forging. A light breeze through the high window carries the tang of fresh bread from the baker's hearth, mingling with the lingering smell of iron. You cross to a sturdy oak chest and lift its lid, revealing a set of finely balanced weights and scales, tools of measurement as vital in justice as in metallurgy. A concrete fact grounds your approach. By the late 18th century, many European courts required torturers to log force metrics, quantifying tension, pressure, and session duration on official scales. This bore the curious irony of rendering cruelty into neat figures. You lift the heaviest weight, a smooth, iron sphere, and feel its reassuring mass. A strange footnote surfaces. Some practitioners claimed that tipping scales slightly in the subject's favor, recording a lower weight than applied, could secure future leniency from magistrates. It was a small bribe of numbers, untraceable in the official ledgers. Historians still debate whether such occasional generosity was covertly tolerated or systematically punished. You set the weight down with a soft clink and smile at the notion of merciful math. You beckon the novice, placing a balance scale on the workbench and assigning them 2 weights. Precision, you instruct, is the secret to both metalwork and mercy. You demonstrate how to zero the scale, a delicate adjustment that balances beam and needle. You guide their hand, whispering 3 subtle quips, weighing one's words, heavy lies the head, and all in proportion. The novice nods, eyes focused. They place the weights opposite each other. The scale hovers perfect on its pivot. You let them try with different weight combinations, each click of iron on iron echoing like measured heartbeat. Behind you, the fishbowl's goldfish drifts serenely, its silent swim, a living counterpoint to your exacting tally. You recall past lessons, rosewater on gauntlets, camphor on straps, hooks of suggestion, all soft approaches balanced by iron resolve. You turn back to the scale. Today's subject, you say, will face only the rack's lightest calibrated tension, enough to weigh fear, not to break bones. You secure the smallest weight, nod to the novice, and exit the workshop. In the corridor, voices drift of a visiting merchant's envoy. 3 men accused of smuggling silk. Their footsteps clatter on cobblestones. You inhale and steel your voice. Prepare the rack for a gentle exercise in disclosure. You instruct the novice. We'll measure their truths as carefully as these weights. 3 final observations settle in your mind. Justice is measured, not crushed. Even fear answers to balance, and mercy finds its form in precise restraint. You lead the novice forward, the scale left behind like a silent promise of moderation. Outside, the dawn sky brightens, and you sense history's turning wheel once more ready to spin. You step into the lofty chamber where morning light filters through stained glass slits, casting muted hues across the stone floor. The air here feels spacious, almost cathedral-like, yet every breath carries the weight of whispered confessions past. At the room's center stands your most imposing device, the whisper rack, an ornate variation with padded rollers designed to induce gradual quiet pressure. It's less brute force, more bone-deep insistence. A firm historical fact anchors your scene. By the early 19th century, some enlightened jurists deemed overt brutality unbecoming of a civilized state and commissioned refined instruments like the whisper rack to civilize coercion. It was cruelty dressed in civility, much like applying perfumed oils to sharpened knives. You draw near and trace a roller's smooth surface with one finger, noting the subtle notches used to adjust tension by mere millimeters. The novelty here lies in control so precise it borders on surgical. You recall the tempering sands, the measured weights, the scalpel-like picks, each tool a step toward finding cruelty's most efficient notch. Beside you, the novice inspects the whisper rack's mechanism, brow furrowed. You offer a light quip. Welcome to silent persuasion. No rattling chains required. 3 more slip quietly. It's the torturer's white glove. Whisper sweet nothings of doubt, and guaranteed minimal squeaks. You demonstrate the adjustment wheel, turning it gently until the rollers press just enough to compress a folded cloth without tearing it. You release it, revealing faint creases, proof that even velvet can yield. The novice nods, eyes bright with both fascination and unease. A curious tidbit comes to mind. Some practitioners affixed soft leather liners to the rollers, believing that pressure distributed over a wider surface increased psychological tension. Subjects felt the slow grind of inevitability rather than sharp pain. It's an emotional torture in slow motion. Historians still debate whether leather liners were common practice or experimental fringe. But the whisper rack's design speaks to a broader quest, to master the interplay of mind and flesh. You pat the novice's shoulder. Remember, fear of the unseen can break stronger wills than agony of the flesh. Outside, a church bell tolls the Angelus. You imagine the townsfolk pausing in prayer, unknowingly synchronized with your workshop's mechanical hymn. You inhale, tasting wood smoke and distant bread crusts, and you smile at the delicious irony. You engage the novice in resetting the device, then guide them to a side table where you keep small notebooks of personal reflections, private confessions of the torturers themselves, penned in candlelight. You select a page, pressure, measured in size, confessions in tremors. You read quietly, feeling a kinship with those who recorded these thoughts centuries before. 3. Reflective observations surface. Journal your doubts. Mercy begins on the page, and ink can be as revealing as iron. You close the notebook and slip it back into its hiding place. Ahead, footsteps approach. Your first subject of the day, a vintner accused of watering down barrels to stretch profits. You exchange a brief glance with the novice. They return it with resolute calm. You release a breath. The whisper rack hums in quiet invitation. You step to the door, lantern in hand, and call, "Enter." As the vintner shuffles in, shoulders slumped beneath a simple wool cloak, you feel the cycle begin anew, the meeting of precision and persuasion, of civility and coercion. You perch at the whisper rack's lever, ready to calibrate not just his body, but his mind's darkest chambers. You usher the vintner gently onto the padded bench in front of the whisper rack, noting the faint aroma of fermenting grapes clinging to his tunic. He inhales sharply at the device's silent bulk, hands trembling like vineyard leaves in autumn winds. You run a fingertip over the rollers, smoothing a stray fleck of dust. A concrete, historical fact underlies your moment. During the 19th century, abuses of instruments, like the whisper rack, prompted heated parliamentary debates, leading some regions to impose strict time limits on mild mechanical persuasion, often no longer than 15 minutes per session. Efficiency once again dictated the bounds of cruelty. You adjust the tension wheel to its lightest setting and step back. "Vintner," you say softly, "we know the barrels were watered. Tell me why." Your voice is calm, an unhurried current beneath still waters. He swallows, eyes flickering with both fear and defiance. You guide the novice to observe the pressure gauge, an added innovation here, where a tiny ivory needle rests just shy of the first marker. Notice, you whisper, how little it takes to induce doubt. The vintner's breath catches as the rollers compress his arms. His lips part in a silent gasp. 3 ironic quips drift beneath your tone. A taste of your own dilution, no cork needed, and this rack, bottled at cellar strength. The vintner's cheek twitches, half a wry smile, half a wince. You lean close, voice like velvet. Admit your fault, and this ends swiftly. He closes his eyes, jaw tightening. You feel the air thrum with expectancy. Will he speak, or will the still pressure rend his resolve? He exhales, voice low. I did it to keep my family fed. You watch the novice's face soften, understanding that motive can temper judgment. You release the tension, rollers receding with a hiss of hydraulics. The vintner slumps forward, relief and shame mingling across his bowed shoulders. You hand him a small flagon of spiced wine, protocol for confessions today. He drinks greedily, the warmth spreading through his chest. You note the irony. A purveyor of watered wine, now refreshed by spiced spirits, gifted as penance. You record his confession. Names of accomplices, quantity of diluted barrels, years of adulteration, and then stand. The whisper racks rollers, gleam in the dawn's pink light, silent witnesses to another soul swayed by gentle insistence. You direct the novice to guide the vintner to the next chamber for official sentencing, a mercy compared to harsher options once on the table. You follow, lanterns glow bobbing, heart steadied by the knowledge that here, even when instruments serve to coerce, compassion can punctuate each twist of the wheel. You slip into the chamber known as the Echo Gallery, where vaulted stone arches amplify even the softest whisper into a cavernous murmur. A lantern hangs from a curved iron hook, its light pooling like quicksilver on the flagstones. You pause at the threshold, sensing how every sound here carries weight, as if the walls themselves bear witness. A firm historical fact underlies the room's design. In 18th century France, some magistrates repurposed abandoned chapel crypts for interrogation, exploiting their acoustics to unsettle suspects. Every cough magnified, every footstep turned foreboding. Sound became another instrument of control. You lead the novice inside, where a single stool sits beneath the highest arch. You place it centrally and test a soft tap of your palm on the stone, a sound that ripples outward, then recedes in layered echoes. You turn to the novice. Every syllable you utter here multiplies. Words become confessions before they're spoken. 3 light quips flicker through your thoughts. Acoustic intimidation, echo chamber debates, and perfect for karaoke confessions. On a narrow shelf, dusty jars of herbs, juniper, mugwort, and rosemary, sit lined in a row. You lift a sprig of mugwort, crushing its feathery leaves between your fingers. Its sweet, bitter aroma drifts upward, a subtle herbicide for fear. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Medieval herbalists believed mugwort repelled nightmares, yet here its scent is weaponized to sharpen the mind's edge. Historians still debate whether these crypt-turned chambers were chosen for practical echo tests or superstition tied to sacred profane thresholds. You tuck that question away, like a loose stone, solid yet unsettled. You light a slender wax taper and place it on a wrought iron stand. The flame quivers, casting shifting shadows that dance across the arches. You step to the stool and motion the novice to stand beneath the light. Ask your question. You whisper, their voice, tentative at first, resonates in layered repeats. Where did you acquire the disputed jewels? Each echo chipping away at their resolve. The suspect, a young woman accused of fencing stolen gems, stands outside the gallery door. You open it, guiding her in. Her cloak is threadbare, and she clutches a small velvet pouch. You settle her onto the stool. As she sits, her voice quivers. I sold them to pay my debts. Each word rings thrice, thrumming like distant bells. You offer her a goblet of cool water, a courtesy in any echo chamber, then close the door, sealing the sound in. You step back as her words fade into the vaulted ceiling, letting the echoes swirl. 3 subtle observations emerge. Confessions multiply. Silence never truly silences, and echoes have longer memories than most. Outside, the bells of Vespers rise and fall. Inside, the echoes continue in gentle waves. The novice takes careful notes, eyes bright with wonder at auditory persuasion. You feel the tension soften. No need for tight straps when sound does the work. Finally, the woman's voice falters, tears glistening in her eyes. She repeats her confession, more quietly this time, and the echoes cradle her words. You open the door and let the echoes spill out into the corridor, where guards record her admission. You extinguish the taper, watching the shadows collapse inward. The echo gallery exhales, returning to its hushed watch. You and the novice depart, the lesson clear. Sometimes, confession needs only a mirror of sound. You cross the silent hall to a small antechamber, lit by a narrow window high in the wall. A low table holds a single blank ledger and a stylus carved from bone. You run your fingertip over the ledger's smooth cover, a promise of fresh entries, new stories to weigh. A concrete historical fact anchors your purpose. By the 19th century, many courts required torturers to maintain personal reflection journals, separate from official records, to humanize or at least regulate their own methods. These diaries were intended as ethical checks, though few survived the shredder. You settle onto a wooden stool, stylus in hand, and beckon the novice to join you. Today, you murmur, we write our own confessions. 3 quiet jokes drift in your mind. Ink and iron, best kept off public record, and confessions of a curious craft. You begin. This day, I have guided fear's gentle hand. The novice watches as you pause, considering each phrase. You invite them to add their reflections. What moved them? What unsettled them? What small mercy they delivered? They dip the stylus and scratch thoughtful lines. I learned that precision can heal as well as harm. On a shelf above, you spot a small wooden statuette, a carved figure of a Stoic philosopher, Epictetus perhaps, placed there by an earlier tutor. Its presence is a silent injunction. Remember wisdom amid your trade. You glance at the figure as you write. May my actions reflect thought as much as technique. An obscure notation occurs to you. Some practitioners inked their journals with blood-red ink, both dramatic and symbolic, believing it lent gravity to each entry. You resist the impulse. Today, ordinary black suffices. Historians still debate whether any such blood-inked diaries were genuine or allegorical tales. You close the ledger gently and place it back on the table. You stand and stretch, the stylus tucked behind your ear. Outside, dawn's first light glows pink along the rooftops. You turn to the novice. Our work demands reflection as much as action. You say softly, write often and write honestly. 3 final reflections settle between you. Mercy begins on the page. Words can bind as chains do, and our own truths deserve confession too. You both leave the chamber. The stylus's faint clink against stone echoing like a promise of conscience in a world of iron. The corridor's hush welcomes you back, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow's confessions, ready to be coaxed, guided, and perhaps tempered by both instrument and introspection. You step into the twilight-lit corridor, lantern held low, its glow dancing across damp stone walls. The scent of rosemary from yesterday's rinsing still clings to the air, mingling with the distant aroma of wood smoke and the faint tang of iron. You follow the novice to a curtained alcove at the far end, where a simple wooden divan sits beneath a narrow slit of moonlight. Today's stage for the silent session. A solid historical fact frames this moment. By the dawn of the 20th century, some reform-minded jurisdictions introduced psychological-only interrogations, forbidding physical contact in hopes that the threat alone might provoke disclosure. It marked an uneasy shift, cruelty without contact, a test of the mind's frailty. You draw back the curtain, revealing the divan's vacant cushion. You pat its surface, inviting the novice to observe how anticipation fills empty seats. 3 quiet observations flit through your mind. Expectation weighs heavy, silence sharpens senses, and an empty chair can be a loud instrument. You guide the novice to a small speaker concealed in the corner, a modern addition to your medieval tapestry. It emits a low, rhythmic pulse, reminiscent of a distant thunderstorm. You adjust its volume incrementally, letting the floorboards rumble faintly underfoot. An obscure tidbit surfaces. Early 20th century psychologists experimented with infrasound, frequencies too low for conscious hearing, to induce unease and disorientation. Some believed it could coax truths from the mind as effectively as any iron device. Historians still debate whether infrasound played a genuine role or if reports were mere legend. Patients claimed to feel a presence, shadows moving, and echoes in the blood. You let the pulse thrum, feeling its subtle vibration through your boots. Outside, the town clock strikes midnight, exactly the witching hour by local lore. You imagine street lamps flickering, shutters rattling, dogs stirring in their chains. You glance at the novice, whose eyes reflect both fascination and discomfort. You nod once, offering silent permission to proceed. You step behind the curtain, gesturing to the empty divan. "Invite our guest in," you whisper. A guard appears, leading forth a weary merchant's widow, accused of hiding illicit letters. She settles onto the cushion, clutching a shawl tightly. You close the curtain, cocooning her in moonlit hush, punctuated only by that low hum. 3 subtle quips drift through your thoughts. No touch, all tension, the mind's own rack, and sharper than any spike. You adjust the pulse again, increasing its depth until the widow's breath catches, a tremor of primal unease. Her eyes widen in the dim light. You speak softly through a hidden intercom. "We know about the letters. Speak now." Your voice carries without physical presence, echoing in the alcove's hush. The widow's lips part, voice quavering. I hid them for my son's safety." Each word vibrates against the unseen currents. You release the pulse, letting the room exhale back into silence. The widow's shoulders slump in relief and shame. You open the curtain, and offer her a cup of cool water, a small mercy after the mind's trial. She drinks, eyes filled with tears. You escort her back to the guard, noting that no chain has grazed her skin, yet her spirit feels equally unburdened by confession. You share a brief glance with the novice, who carries the lesson that sometimes the unseen instrument wields the greatest power. You step out into the moonlit corridor, drawing the curtain closed on the silent session. The speaker's hum fades, leaving only the lingering echo of confession held in the dark. You return to the main workshop as dawn's first light seeps beneath the gateway, softening the cold stone with pale gold. On the central workbench rests a series of leather-bound dossiers. Today's final act, review, and resolution. You gather them tenderly, like a scholar handling sacred texts, mindful of every crease and scuff. A concrete historical fact accents your task. By mid-20th century, many judicial systems required torturers, or their successors, interrogators, to submit after-action reports summarizing methods used, outcomes achieved, and any unintended consequences. These reports, filed in secure archives, formed the basis for evolving standards of humane procedure. You settle at the bench, the novice beside you, and open the first dossier, the vintner's confession, the midwife's botanical trial, the echo gallery's shimmering admissions, and the widow's silent release. You trace your finger along each entry, recalling the instruments and methods that guided them. 3 reflective musings surface. Records shape memory, mercy lives in the margins, and ink outlasts regret. You reach for a small jar of violet oil, the same pressed petal from section 13, now infused for clarity. You dab a drop on your wrist and breathe it in, letting its floral sweetness anchor you. An obscure note drifts through your thoughts. Some interrogators kept scented oils handy, believing they could soothe both subject and practitioner after harrowing sessions. Whether scent or ritual provided true solace is lost to time. Historians still debate the efficacy of such olfactory tokens. Were they genuine talismans of compassion or mere perfumed band-aids over conscience? You smile wryly and flip to the next dossier. The novice watches as you annotate margins with measured care, notes on effectiveness, suggestions for gentler alternatives, brief jottings on psychological impact. Each mark is both a professional critique and a personal promise to blend iron with empathy in equal measure. Outside, the world awakens. Roosters crow, shutters creak open, the baker's cart rattles over cobbles. You glance at the high window and picture the cat's soft silhouette perched in the dawn glow. You inhale the cool morning air, tinged with smoke and fresh bread. You close the final dossier and secure them in a leather satchel stamped with your workshop's seal. You pat the bag's worn surface, each page a testament to our work. You murmur. 3 final insights linger. Evaluation is its own art, mercy inscribed in ink, and tomorrow's methods begin here. You rise and stretch, the sapling of reflection strengthened by each review. The novice stands and salutes, ready to embark on their own path of measured restraint. You share a nod, mentor to pupil, torturer to guide, practitioner to conscience. The workshop stands hushed but expectant, instruments at rest, shadows poised for the next tale. You tuck the satchel aside and lift the lantern one last time, its glow a small star against the stone. You step outside into the awakening town, carrying the weight of records, the promise of refinement, and the soft hope that compassion, like iron, can be forged anew. You pause at the workshop threshold, inhaling the crisp morning air, laced with dew and distant wood smoke. The old forge behind you is dormant now, coals gray as weathered stone, its warmth carried off by last night's confessions. Before you lies a narrow hall, lined with cupboards of parchment scrolls, each tied with colored ribbons. Today's task, archiving and closure. You step forward, boots soft on the flagstones. A solid historical fact anchors this ritual. By the early 21st century, archival standards required every confession, physical, psychological, or purely suggestive, to be cataloged, cross-referenced, and encrypted in protected records, ensuring both transparency and the safeguarding of sensitive data. The curator's pen had become as vital as the rack's lever. You unlock the nearest cupboard and pull out a scroll bound in deep crimson. The ribbon slides free, unfurling to reveal the midwife's botanical trial and the vintner's whisper rack session, a tapestry of mercy and pressure. You lay it on a long oak table beneath a high window where morning light spills like liquid gold. You retrieve a fine goosequill pen and a small bottle of archival ink, its pigment rich and lasting. You begin a summary entry. Date, dawn of another era. Instruments rest, minds laid bare. As you write, the novice hovers, absorbing each stroke, each deliberate flourish of your hand. 3 quiet riffs flicker in your mind. Calligraphy of compassion, scripts of subtle coercion, and ink forensics pending. You notice a tiny hallmark on the scroll's corner, the fishbowl's embossed seal, a subtle callback to the goldfish's serene witness. You smile. Even archives remember, you murmur. Yet between these lines lies an obscure note. Some modern archivists affixed scented slips, paper sachets scented with lavender or rose, to each file, believing the fragrance would steady practitioners revisiting grim records. The theory: calm minds archive with greater clarity. Historians still debate whether these perfumed footnotes aided focus or simply masked the stale odor of fear. You slip a lavender sachet beneath the crimson ribbon before retying it, a gesture of respect for both subject and scribe. You move down the line of cupboards, each scroll telling a chapter. The scholar's spike gauntlet, confession. The echo gallery's triple resonance admission. The silent session's infrasound surrender. You pause at the ledger for the torture guild's own reflections, the stylus-penned confessions of torturers themselves, now sealed behind a ribbon of midnight blue. You trace its ribbon, imagining each personal doubt tied within. You unroll just enough parchment to record its closure. Workshop reflections, tempered by iron and ink. You close it gently, mindful that these personal archives carry the heaviest weight of all. You nod to the novice, respect every seal. You instruct, each ribbon binds a life. Beyond the window, rooftops gleam in the sun's ascent. You recall the distant clink of the baker's cart, the cat's silent dawn patrol, the bell's brief paean to vespers, fading into morning. You tuck each sealed scroll back into its proper slot, each archive now bearing both record and ritual. 3 final observations hover in the hush. History, safe kept in fragrance and ink. Archives cradle both truth and mercy, and memory thrives in careful hands. You close the last cupboard door, the click echoing like a bookmark snapped shut. You gather your quill and ink, placing them back on the anvil's ledge. The workshop around you stands quiet, yet expectant. archives sealed, instruments at ease. You exchange a look with the novice, both guardians now of stories written in fear and compassion. With that, you lift the lantern and step out into the awakening courtyard, carrying the weight of record-keeping as both duty and benediction. You return to the courtyard's open air, lantern in hand, its light a small counterpoint to the rising sun's brilliance. The stone beneath your boots is cool, dotted with morning dew that sparkles like scattered gems. You pause at a low bench beneath a creeping vine of jasmine, today's setting for reflection and renewal. A firm historical fact frames this moment. In some modern practices, after-action debriefings replaced solitary reflection. Groups of practitioners would convene to share insights, lessons learned, and emotional responses, aiming to foster resilience and accountability. It was community over isolation, conversation over silence. You settle onto the bench and set the lantern at your feet. The novice stands beside you, silent. You retrieve 2 small notebooks, the confidential debrief journals, and pass one to them. "Let's talk," you say softly, voice carried by the jasmine-scented breeze. 3 gentle jokes surface. Mandatory chat out? No escape with ghosting. And feel good after party. You begin. Today, we balanced fear's precision with mercy's feather. You pause, inhaling jasmine. What weighed on you most? The novice's gaze drops to their journal. They fork the pen between fingers, then write, "The echo gallery." Each word felt multiplied by my own doubts. You nod, recognizing your own tremor beneath yesterday's lessons. You share your reflection. I feared forgetting mercy's margin, that narrow space between control and compassion. An obscure tidbit drifts to mind. In certain traditions, jasmine garlands were worn by artisans meditating on balance, believed to align heart and hand. You tuck a strand of vine behind your ear, grounding yourself in both scent and symbol. Historians still debate whether such botanical adjuncts genuinely aided mindfulness or simply added ritual flair. You exchange a look with the novice. Both of you bound by question and blossom. You pass them a vial of rose water and hand them a clean cloth. "Wash your hands," you instruct. As they do, you reflect. The tactile act of cleansing connects body and mind, a small ceremony of renewal. 3 final musings drift through your thoughts. Reflection refreshes purpose, community eases burdens, and even torturers thrive on empathy. You rise, lantern in hand, the jasmine's fragrance clinging to your sleeves. You pat the novice on the shoulder, a small benediction. Outside, the courtyard's gate creaks open as town life resumes. Vendors calling wares, a child scampering past with a wooden hoop, the baker's cart lumbering ahead. You step beyond the gate, the workshop's heavy doors closing behind you with a soft thud. In your satchel lie archives sealed, journals half written, tools at rest. Ahead, the cobbled street stretches into a sunlit morning, each step carrying the promise of both remembrance and renewal. You walk slowly along the sun-warmed cobblestones. The lanterns glow, nearly invisible now beneath the bright morning light. Each step feels measured, the quiet crunch of gravel under your boots, almost like a heartbeat, reminding you of every confession, every whisper, every carefully balanced choice you made in the echoing halls. The novice follows silently, hands clasped, carrying their own quiet bundle of thoughts. A grounding historical fact anchors this moment. By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, many countries officially abolished torture in law, replacing it with advanced psychological profiling and prolonged isolation as methods of extracting information, while unofficial practices often continued in shadowed corners of the world. The workshop, in its own way, became a museum, less a place of tools and confessions, more a reminder of the slow evolution of cruelty into control. You pause at a fountain in the town square, water spilling gently from a lion's mouth into the mossy basin below. Children dart around it, laughing, chasing each other with sticks. You sit on the cool stone edge, letting the breeze lift the hair from your neck. 3 soft jokes flicker through your mind. Torture museum, now accepting visitors. Waterboarding, but aesthetic. And don't drink the historical water. As you watch the water ripple, you remember the silent session's hum, the echo gallery's layered voices, the goldfish gliding in circles back in the workshop. Each element returns as a fragment of your teaching. Fear, reflection, mercy. You let the sound of water become your momentary meditation, a gentle call to slow your breath, to let your shoulders ease. You pull out your small leather notebook, the same one you used by lantern light after the day's last confession. You write, "Today, the tools rest. The ink dries. The water flows." The novice leans over your shoulder, reading in silence. You look up at them and ask, "What did you learn?" They hesitate before answering. That fear is lighter when shared. You nod, closing the notebook softly. An obscure tidbit surfaces, drifting like a leaf on the water. In some medieval towns, fountains were believed to hold whispers of those executed in the square. The water said to murmur confessions on moonlit nights. Historians still debate whether these stories arose from genuine folklore or were invented by tavern storytellers seeking an audience. You listen carefully, just in case the water decides to speak. You stand, stretching in the morning sun, lantern swaying lightly at your side. The scent of bread and horses thick in the air. You walk with the novice down a narrow street, lined with hanging laundry, each sheet billowing like a pale ghost above your heads. You pause beneath one, letting its cool dampness brush your hair. 3 final reflections linger quietly. Tools sleep, but memories breathe. Confessions ripple outward, and mercy, like water, finds every crack. You turn one last time toward the workshop at the street's end, its door closed, its windows dark. You bow your head briefly, acknowledging the past while allowing the future to stretch, empty and bright, ahead of you. You leave the town behind, taking a winding path up a gentle hill, where the grass shifts like silk in the morning breeze. The lantern swings gently in your hand, unlit now, a token rather than a tool. The novice walks beside you, the air around you both filled with bird song and the scent of wild mint crushed beneath your boots. A clear historical fact hums beneath your steps. As torture methods became relics, museums dedicated to their memory arose worldwide, preserving iron maidens, racks, and gauntlets behind glass, labeling them with placards, disclaimers, and quiet horror. It was humanity's attempt to look upon its cruelty without turning away, to remind itself of what should never be normalized again. You reach a small plateau overlooking the town, rooftops glinting, smoke curling lazily into the morning sky. You sit in the grass, feeling the earth's coolness seep into your palms, grounding you. You hand the lantern to the novice, letting them hold it, a symbol of trust, a passing of quiet responsibility. 3 gentle quips drift by on the breeze, from torture chamber to tourist trap. now featuring the gift shop, and buy your regret keychain on the way out. You both chuckle softly, the laughter light unburdened. You close your eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the sun ease into your shoulders, and as you open them, you notice a small stone marker half hidden in the grass. You brush away the dew, revealing a single word carved deeply. Remember, an obscure tidbit surfaces. In some parts of Eastern Europe, small mercy stones were placed outside torture sites, believed to grant peace to the souls who suffered within. Some visitors still leave flowers or coins on these stones, quiet prayers for atonement. Historians still debate whether these stones were an organized tradition or the quiet rebellion of individuals seeking solace in small gestures. Either way, you place your hand on the marker, letting the promise of mercy settle into your bones. You turn to the novice and say, "One day, people will come here not to fear, but to learn." You imagine a family standing here, a child asking, "What was this place?" and a parent answering, "A place where people learned to stop hurting each other." 3 final reflections whisper through your mind. Memory is the true lantern. Mercy outlasts fear. And we carry these lessons so others may rest. You stand, brushing grass from your robes, and take the lantern back, holding it high for a moment before letting it swing gently again. The town below is waking. Carts rolling, birds wheeling, dogs barking, the bright day unrolling like a promise. You take a breath, your last glance toward the horizon, holding the memory of every confession, every careful cruelty, every moment you chose mercy over fear, truth over silence. The path downward is open, bright, and quiet, waiting for you to walk it. You descend the hill slowly, the lantern swinging softly at your side, its glass catching fragments of dawn light like a tired firefly. The novice walks beside you, steps quiet on the dew-wet grass, the air carrying the scent of mint and a distant chimney smoke. Each step feels final, yet unhurried, as if the earth itself wishes you to linger a little longer in this pause before returning to the world below. A grounding historical fact breathes in this final walk. Despite centuries of evolving laws and Enlightenment ideals, the residue of cruelty often remained hidden within the bureaucracies of justice, reminding us that systems may change faster than hearts, and yet small mercies, whispered apologies, and recorded confessions quietly transformed institutions from within, often unseen. You reach a weathered wooden gate at the bottom of the hill, its hinges creaking softly as you push it open. Ahead, the cobbled path leads back toward the square, where the fountain still gurgles softly. The novice stops, looking back toward the hilltop. You pause with them, letting the weight of memory settle in the hush. 3 soft quips drift in the air. Retirement plan. Fewer racks, more naps. Lanterns for lighting, not for lurking. And torturer turned tour guide. You both smile faintly, laughter blending with birdsong. You remember the goldfish in its round glass bowl, the quiet water, the violet scent drifting in candlelight. You remember the echo gallery's layered voices, the whisper rack's careful pressure, the silent session's hum. Each fragment returns, not to haunt you, but to remind you of the responsibility you carried and the gentle hand you tried to maintain within a world prone to harshness. An obscure note lingers. Some practitioners, at the end of their tenure, planted trees on the grounds of old torture chambers, believing the roots would reclaim the earth from past cruelties. Whether these trees were true monuments or personal absolution is still debated by historians. You stop, planting your lantern in the soft soil by the path, letting it stand like a small beacon as you and the novice sit on the grass. Three final reflections drift like petals. Mercy is a seed. Memory is soil. Peace is the harvest. The breeze stirs, carrying the scent of wildflowers and warm stone as the town's bells begin to toll softly, not as a summons, but as a benediction to close this chapter. You close your eyes, feeling the breeze whisper across your face. A gentle hush in a world that rarely slows. The sun is warm, but not harsh, its light filtering through drifting leaves, dappling your closed eyelids in patterns of gold. You breathe in deeply, the air cool in your lungs, the scent of mint and soft earth grounding you. You let the breath out, slowly, like letting go of a weight you have carried without realizing. Somewhere in the distance, water trickles, a quiet rhythm, like a lullaby you do not need to remember. Birds call softly from the hedges, each note a small promise that dawn always follows darkness and rest always follows effort. Your body feels heavy, but in a comforting way, as if the earth is holding you, reminding you that you are allowed to be still, to be silent, to simply be. The lantern beside you is unlit now, resting in the grass, its glass cool to the touch. You run a finger along its curve, remembering how it once guided you through dim corridors and echoing halls, and how now it can simply be a lantern, no longer a burden of duty, but a gentle witness to the morning. The novice sits beside you, breathing quietly, no words needed. The breeze lifts a strand of hair from your forehead. The town bell tolls one final soft chime, and then there is only the hush, the warmth, the quiet. You are here, now, at the end of this journey. You are safe. You are allowed to rest. Sleep now, if you wish. Sleep, and let the world be soft. Sleep,